Hey guys, welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be talking about back pain when you're lying down flat on your back. What's causing it? How does it work? What's actually going on? And then a little bit about what can we do to really help this, because once we understand what's going on in our back, we'll be able to do a lot more effective work to relieve it. If you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. We do these live streams every single weekday. We're starting another week today, so if you do hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the notification bell as well so you know when we go live. We'll be doing Q&A at the end of today's live stream as well. We've got Lara the other side of the camera, so get your questions down in there so you know, or so we know what to address at the end of the live stream. And little word just on the board, I'll get to that in a moment about this week's competition, a really exciting one for your chance to win the inversion table. So with that being said, let's get into today's topic. So before we do get into it, don't forget there's going to be a link in the YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, there's going to be a link somewhere in the description, and also on Facebook. Lara's just getting that link there for you guys. The competition ends this Friday, so we've got 4 days left to enter, so there's more details about that. Really exciting competition, so check that out. Now, with regards to back pain when lying flat on your back, it is something that really bothers a lot of people. I'm going to go through really what is causing that first, so you can understand what you're feeling and match it up, because some of you guys will feel different sorts of pain when you lie on your back. Others will feel one thing, some will feel different things. So we've got to bear that in mind, because it means different things as well. In some cases it's not necessarily so bad. So first and foremost, what is sort of causing the injury? Well, we've got the drawing on the back here, which I will get to a little bit more later on. But we've obviously got this lower section of the lumbar spine. We've got the sacrum S1 down here. We've got L5, which is the last lumbar vertebra, 4, 3, 2, 1. And in between all of those, we've got those discs. Now, a lot of us on a daily basis, we're sat down for extended periods. Just do the maths and actually add up how much of your day do you spend sat down. You know, we've got a 45-minute commute. Maybe nowadays you're just sat, you get up out of bed, go straight into your office at home because you're working from home. You know, all these sorts of things. And then we're going to spend time on the sofa, we're going to spend time in the car. A vast majority of many people's day is spent sat down. And this, even if you're sat in the best position, which we've discussed in previous live streams, you're going to be putting more pressure through the discs, particularly 5 and 4, L5, S1, and the disc between L4 and L5, these two down here. And this can start to create a degree of irritation in those regions. Now, the second thing we want to bear in mind as well is we're going to have tightening of these hip flexors, these muscles on the front, and the hamstrings to a degree as well, as they just don't go through the necessary movements on a daily basis. And that again is something that we need to consider when we go and put this spine on its back flat. It's going to affect the mechanics and how things move. So if we take that first example, we've got that excessive compression over a period of time through those discs. They start to get a little bit irritated, a little bit injured, and that can be the initial cause of your back pain. So what is happening when we lie down flat on our back? Well, when we lie on our back, we should have a natural lordosis. We should have our bum here touching the floor. We should have a little hollow where our lower back is here, and then our rib cage should be touching the floor, and then another hollow where our neck is, and then the back of our skull should be touching the floor as well. We shouldn't have a flat spine the whole way through. The reason for that is because that indicates there's maybe something going on. Now, there are some variations there, certain anatomy in and around the glute region. If we've got slightly larger glutes or more fat disposition there or lay down there, then it can have some influences, but that can go either way as well, so it's worth bearing that in mind. But we should have that arch. Now, we'll start with number 2 first in the flattened curve, because if we're flattening that curve, if this back is flattening down here and the hamstrings are pulling on the sacrum, pulling it round, as we flatten the curve, we're going to compress these lower discs in particular. We're going to put more pressure through those. And this is where, when we're lying down on our back, we can start to feel that achiness, that deeper ache. Or maybe it's going down into the sacrum, coming down around here. Maybe it's going out across the top of your glutes, just on sort of your waist region. And it's much more of an achy feeling, rather unpleasant. And that's literally because we're compressing the front part of the vertebral unit, which is going to be those discs. We're creating a stretch, possibly through some ligaments on the back here, that is going to create inflammation. And the problem with that is then when we go to get up, it can be awfully difficult because inflammation has started to build up in here. So that's the first one, and we will get on to what we need to do to sort this out afterwards, because it's quite similar in both scenarios, and I will explain why a little bit later as well. So the second one, which we put first for some reason, is hyperextension or unstable joints. Now, this can be because of two reasons, and I've put hyperextension and unstable joints. If we have any more severe injuries, sometimes when we lie down on our back, this L5 can shear a little bit. It can create a little bit of irritation, and that can cause the facet joints, which are on the back here, these little bits here, which I've drawn with expert artistic skill. These little facet joints can rub onto one another, and that can create a much more sharp pain. And if you've got this level of instability in your L5S1 or L45, this is also the thing that catches you when you're rolling over in bed. You roll over from one side to the other and boom, there's that electric shock. Now it can either be in your back or it can go down the legs. That's the same sort of thing as when we're lying flat on our back and all of a sudden, boom, it really catches us in a very different way to the other example I mentioned where it's more of an ache. This hyperextension or unstable joint catching on those facets is going to create that sharper pain. Now the next one with regards to hyperextension, which is the same sort of thing. Maybe we don't have that much instability there, but we've got a lot of tightness on the front of these hips. We've spent hours every day for decades sat in front of a computer 9 till 5, and we've had a 1 hour commute each way in the car, sat, not done the necessary work to stretch our hips out. Well, on a complete side note, that's no good whatsoever for the status of these hips from a degenerative point of view. We need to go through full ranges of motion in our hips, so that's maybe one for another live stream. But what happens is these hip flexors on the front here will pull on the front of the spine, and you'll feel there's an excessive arch. Now this will also give a similar sort of sharp or more localized pain in this region, but this is for different reasons, maybe not quite so bad. We know we've got some sort of injury in this region, that's for sure. But when the spine is being pulled forwards on the front of here, it's making these little holes smaller. And we know from previous live streams, we've got the nerves that come out of each of these segments here, and those run through a finite hole. And if that hole gets smaller, any inflammation that's built up in there is now occupying a smaller space, and therefore the relative pressure is going to increase. That is going to create irritation of that nerve and create problems. Now that's not necessarily so much of a problem in of itself. It's just the fact that we're going into a degree of extension because these muscles are tight, but that is exposing maybe some low-grade inflammation down here. Quite often with this more sharp variation of pain in the lower back, when we go into extension, when we lie flat on the floor, the pain actually isn't there on a day-to-day basis. And this is very, very interesting because people will be walking around with these sort of subacute or low-grade minor discomforts that only really get revealed to you when you do something like lying flat on your back. That shouldn't be painful. Going into a degree of extension should not be painful in your lower back. But if there's some low-grade excess inflammation kicking around in this area of our lumbar spine because there's some minor stresses and strains on these discs, etc., from maybe bad habits, bad posture, and other bits and pieces, previous injuries, then it's going to show that actually there is some inflammation here, because when we go into extension, we get that sharp pain. And that might be the first cue, the first clue that actually there's something going on in that lower back, and it's a much better time right now to actually do some work to rehabilitate that and get on top of it. Maybe we know we haven't been as active as we otherwise should have been. Maybe we know we haven't been taking care of ourselves from a physical standpoint, and actually doing some sensible exercises would be a good idea. And all too often, those of you that are maybe a little bit more conscientious will start doing that, and then you start doing leg raises and sit-ups and all these other exercises that actually go and unfortunately make the problem worse. So we do want to make sure that we're doing the right sort of exercises to help strengthen and protect our lumbar spine. So that is also very, very important. Now, I said here at near the start of this video that we'd be talking about what can you do to help. And really this is it's a problem of movement in this section of our lumbar spine, and one of the really good exercises that we always recommend is going to be that towel exercise. Now this isn't fixing the underlying problem, but it helps us lie more effectively with the appropriate support on our spine, and I'll explain why. So when we use the towel, we take a rolled up towel around about the size of a foam roller. Don't use a foam roller the first time, please. It will be too strong for you, but we're talking about something like that sort of size. And what we do is we place it just here in the lower back. Okay, that is maybe our belly button would be on the front, just up here. So it's about that level. We talk about the bony bits and things like that, but maybe that's a little bit too much detail for today. But that's the right spot. And why is this towel working? How is this working here? Well, it's something that we recommend in the Back in Shape, and it works really, really well. And there's much more details, and you can find out about that. There's probably a link in the description as well. But why does this work? Because it does two things. It addresses both of these at the same time. And admittedly, for many of you that maybe have had this sort of back trouble for a longer period of time, maybe you've just got this pain when you lie flat on your back, but you've had back issues for a longer period of time, maybe not so noticeable now other than this. It's worth bearing in mind that this can be a little bit uncomfortable when we first do it. But what is it doing? Well, first and foremost, it's supporting the natural arch, which is very, very important. The second thing is because it's pushing up into the spine gently, it's also creating a lengthening effect. That is creating a stretch through the spine, which does two things. Number one, it decompresses these discs. It takes pressure off these discs, which means they stretch out, take some pressure off. It's like a mini decompression at home. Works very, very well. But number two, it also protects us if we do have any unstable joints, because it's acting quite broadly across these joints here, and therefore it's going to move them all in the same way, as opposed to if we just pull from the hip flexors, it's pulling on one joint and this mobile one will move inappropriately, which is what we discussed a little bit earlier on. It helps the normal movement into a position of relative extension, whilst also having a decompressive effect through the entire spine, giving those discs a little bit of a break, opening out these holes here a little bit, and just generally providing the spine with a moment of respite to allow it to just go through those necessary healing processes. And you might do this for somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes at a time. Some of you will do a little bit longer. I really would encourage you not to do longer than 10 minutes for reasons that we can go into in maybe the Q&A section if anyone's particularly interested. But this is a fantastic exercise. You must make sure you get off very slowly, but it's all about supporting your spine in a neutral position, and that's what many of us on a daily basis really struggle to do, which is why back pain builds up. We don't have the appropriate supporting mechanisms actively in our muscles to protect and stabilize the lumbar spine and prevent it from injury. And we also spend too much of the day in positions that are away from the neutral. The spine is designed to help us move around on a daily basis. It's designed to have a certain structure to it because that structure is stable. It's designed to have very mobile hips underneath it so that it can do most of the movement while the spine retains a nice strong position in order to load bear. And all too often, these principles are not adhered to on a daily basis. And if we don't adhere to those in the recovery process, things like even lying down flat on your back, your spine doesn't move appropriately. And that's where we get that pain. Either the aching sort, where you're actually irritating the injury because your spine is just dropping flat, or the more sharp pain where we're compressing and irritating some of those nerves, or irritating those facet joints where we have elements of instability, usually from repetitive injuries to the same segment dealt with poorly. For example, if we were to repeatedly injure our discs or the lower part of our lower back, and for the last 5 to 10 years we've been given knee hugs as the routine exercise to do, we will have stretched out all the ligaments around here, so they'll be completely incompetent and unable to provide any degree of stability whatsoever to that segment, coupled with a lack of muscular support in that area. And we have a little bit of an issue when we're doing things like lying down when the muscles turn off. So hopefully this live stream's been pretty helpful for you guys, understanding this very, very simple way of getting to grips with a problem that does affect quite a few people. We know because other videos we've touched on this topic have raised quite a lot of questions. So hopefully this explores it in a little bit more of a long form video. And over to you guys for any questions.
Okay, awesome. Good morning, everybody. Yes, please do continue popping your questions in the comments below. We'll get straight into them on Facebook. Sally said, lying flat and having soreness in the sacrum. What might this be about?
That's really that first bit that I mentioned, Sally, with regards to compression of the discs, if it's dropping down into the back. There could also be a degree of hypersensitivity where we've had these issues for a longer period of time. Simply the pressure on there can be a pain, the actual contact point. So even if you're maybe lying on your front or standing or lying on your side and someone just presses on those tissues, if that degree of things is sore, then that aspect of the issue is more a inappropriate response to simple stimuli, and that is a bit more challenging because it then means we have issues with doing things that are good just because the contact is uncomfortable, rather than the actual exercise in and of itself being uncomfortable. And it's very rare that would happen in isolation. You wouldn't really get that sensitivity on general contact if there hadn't been an issue inside for a longer period of time. So it's worth bearing that in mind. I think that hopefully helps Sally.
Okay, and Cheryl does want to know, why don't you suggest doing the towel for any longer than that 10 minutes?
Yeah, sure. So in the clinic, we've touched on it in previous live streams, we do spinal remodeling. Spinal remodeling works to change the alignment of your spine. It subjectively changes the alignment of your spine, and in a period of 3 to 4 months, you can change the alignment in the lumbar spine by about 25%. increasing in the curve. I'm very, very reluctant. We've done other live streams where we've talked about the limits of proper examination. Physical examination is notoriously inaccurate, and unfortunately a lot of patients aren't aware of that, and sometimes the osteopath or the chiropractor or the doctor or whoever it is almost seems to be like a godlike figure who can somehow feel all these different things that are supposedly happening in your body and make assertions that, when looked at under investigation compared to imaging where it's very, very accurate, we find that, well, wait a second, they don't really know what they're talking about. They're making claims that can't really be supported or are highly unlikely to be as accurate as they believe they are. And you only really get turned on to this when you've worked and done a lot of stuff, seeing patients and having imaging to go alongside. You go, wait a second, we're really not as accurate as we thought we were. And you have to bear in mind, a lot of osteopaths, a lot of chiropractors, etc. don't. Now, well, maybe chiropractors a little bit less so, but physios, osteopaths in particular, don't tend to work as much with imaging. So they're not aware of the inaccuracies in their physical examinations. So it's worth bearing that in mind. But then when we talk about changing the alignment, we do that in the clinic after we've actually measured where exactly things are. So if I was to say to you, yeah, do you know what, it's okay to do it for 20 minutes. Well, it is, but you might repeat it. If you're doing that repeatedly over a period of time, you will have an impact on the alignment of your lumbar spine. And I don't know exactly what your measurements are, you don't know what your measurements are, and you don't necessarily know that we need to increase it in certain areas. Not to mention the fact that the towel is great for that momentary relief, but we do need a little bit more curve in L4 and L5, the L4-5, sorry, and L5-S1. The spine naturally curves a lot more here than it does up here. So if we're not necessarily being as accurate with the towel, that's not a problem for 3 to 5 minutes. It can actually be helpful from a symptomatic point of view, but from a correcting the alignment point of view, it may then over time start to lead to changes in curve. And I think, Shower, you mentioned one of these one of these towels or cushions, sorry, in the Back in Shape group, and that's a prime example where the lady on the actual material is putting the towel, that little cushion thing was about here in the lumbar spine. So if you were doing that for 20 minutes a day for 3 to 4 months, all of a sudden we've completely messed up the alignment in our lumbar spine if we're doing it for 20 minutes. Whereas if we're doing it for 3 to 5 minutes, we're not going to have any lasting impacts like that when it comes to ligament changes. So that's really, really important that we're not doing those sorts of things. And even these sorts of devices, which can be useful, and I think we touched on, I think that hopefully that message got across that that particular example of a device could actually really, really help you as just a more convenient alternative to the towel. But even on the literature, they're not putting it in the right place. So it's worth just bearing that in mind.
Okay.
Hope that helps as well, by the way.
Jeannie has asked, how does the towel help fix spondylolisthesis? Very good question.
The towel doesn't fix a spondylolisthesis, unfortunately. I wish it did. So the spondylolisthesis is essentially a shifting forwards of these lumbar vertebrae. So we've got the L5 one here. I'm going to ruin this drawing now as if it wasn't ruined already. The L5 might shift forwards to here. And that is a spondylolisthesis.
When you're standing, right?
Sorry? No, it can be when you're lying down. It's just what we often find, and this is my gripe with MRIs in particular, is that sometimes when they lie down, it slots back into place, and then when they stand up, it moves. So if we only rely on MRI imaging, we don't see how that spine deals with the load of gravity, and that can often make a simple disc problem that it appears to be on an MRI change to a fundamentally different animal on an x-ray because there's severe instability at this level. The towel is not going to change that fundamentally. You're not going to change that. What will normally happen is we'll either see if the body can manage and stabilize the segment itself, which in a lot of cases it can, but if it does get too severe, these spondylolistheses are graded. We actually I'm pretty sure we did did we do a live stream on spondylolisthesis?
Yeah,
we definitely did. So that'll be on, check out the YouTube channel because they'll have, we did a full one on that. But you can't really fix and just cause it to drop back. When they're more severe, higher graded 3 and 4, then sometimes you will have to have a degree of surgery to stabilize that. But it does vary. I remember seeing a patient who had a minor backache for a number of years come into the clinic. This was years ago, and his L5, it wasn't there. It was literally here. It was, hanging on by a whisker. It was an awful grade 4 spondylolisthesis, absolutely awful. And he was just wandering around with a bit of backache. So, we have to bear these things in mind. It was probably rather stable, but it's always a surprise when you see those sorts of things on x-rays. Again, I stress, as I've already mentioned before, imaging is useful. And people that say otherwise, getting on a little bit of a rant here, but you'll have numerous physios, osteos, and even chiros a little bit saying, oh, we don't need imaging, you could X-ray and MRI these people. But to state that that isn't a problem that this patient didn't know about for years, and he's one step away from something being rather bad, the notion that that isn't an important thing to find and to be aware of for very, very limited downside of doing the scan other than the financial cost of that, and sometimes that's just on the NHS, I think is really not a very good way to be. I've seen too many concerning things. I always remember another story of a lady that came in that was very adamant of how rough and strong her previous practitioner was with her manipulation and crack, and then it turned out that when we got the X-rays done, we got the radiology report back, and you could see it as well. We always get a radiology report to just as a way of double checking things. Many of you guys will know that. And they said this lady's walking around with a fracture in her neck and her lower back. Can you please get in contact with her swiftly? And she's in there, the week before, she's in there telling me about how she just wanted to be, moved around. She's fine. There's no problems. Crack me, this, that, the other. And that would have been very unwise. And I would have been left, had we done that, you never know. We could have been left in a very unfortunate situation. So that is why we do imaging. That is why it's important. And it only takes one unfortunate event where you didn't know that something like that is there to really knock your confidence as a practitioner, because you'd never want to do any harm. And this helps us really understand that and make sure that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's try to help Alexis here. She said, I've been suffering with back pain for 13 years. I believe it started, she says here, when she gave birth to her son. She's been to see chiropractors, massage therapists, physiotherapists, but the pain is still the same. What would you recommend? Well,
I'd without being too short in the answer, I'd definitely recommend go through the back in shape. A lot of ladies, anyone can appreciate that the process of childbirth, it used to be a threatening thing for ladies' lives and the child's life. It is a very challenging thing for the human body to go through, and whether we've had a C-section or other complications during that process, we will have had some degree of muscular disruption. The size that a lady will change to, your abdominal cavity will change to, that's going to affect the competence in that midsection. And if we don't get the appropriate exercises and the appropriate advice to go alongside a degree of treatment, whether it's chiropractic, osteopathy, or the sort of stuff that we do in the clinic, then we're going to really struggle to get better. We need to understand the back problem itself. And unfortunately, if that was such a long time ago and we haven't done the proper sort of exercises to actually start getting the ball rolling and getting better again, then we will have a good degree of incompetence in those muscles. And I think the best thing to do is start, first of all, that phase 1 stuff. See if we actually have control over that midsection. You might find that actually you thought you had control over your core, but you don't when we do that core engagement exercise. That's free in the phase 1 back in shape. And then as we move on to maybe for example, I know many of you, many of the members that are in back in shape, when they start the phase 2, one of the very first exercises, you go, whoa, wait a second, this isn't good. This is hard. I can't hold my spine steady. Part of the thing we need to do when we lie on our back, which is probably what you're struggling to do, and this would highlight this weakness, is that when we lie on our back and we then move our legs, whatever it may be, we should be able to hold our spine steady and neutral. And quite often one of those first 1 or 2 exercises in the phase 2 back in shape will all of a sudden reveal that actually, even lying on my back, moving one of my legs, I'm not able to hold my spine in a neutral, still position. And that will reveal really all you need to know about the incompetence in that section of the lumbar spine. And there's only one way to get that going. Yes, if you were close to central London, we could help you with treatment. And if you've got a chiropractor or a physio or an osteopath who's sensibly minded and understands the structure of the spine and kind of specializes in that, then they would be able to help you with treatment. But it is necessary, 100% necessary, for you to go through a sensible rehabilitation approach, not doing knee hugs and those other things that I've mentioned. If you've done those in the past, unfortunately, they will have made the situation worse. And that's you're not alone at all. Unfortunately, that happens all too often.
Yes. Okay. Hope that helps you, Alexis. I've put the link for the Back in Shape program in the comments, and it is free to join that phase 1. Yeah. So I really hope that helps.
The pregnancy is if we have C-sections and other complications, and you're there's a very vulnerable new persons in the world that you're prioritizing, and yourself doesn't get that care that it really does need after such an ordeal.
Yeah. Okay, Alex Esco has asked, would you advise a small lumbar towel whilst lying in bed?
I don't think so. For reasons that I mentioned, this falls into one of the other questions that we had with regards to for long. I think it was Cheryl that asked for longer than 5 to 10 minutes, or longer than the 10-minute mark. For that reason, I'd probably say no. But if it helps you get a little bit comfortable, then popping that towel in underneath your lower back can be a necessary step. I just wouldn't be doing it for extended periods. In terms of, don't sleep like that. I think that would be unwise. I think you're better off sleeping on your side, really. In your case, Alex, and in most people's case, it's much easier to maintain a neutral position.
Yeah, a similar type of question. Karen asked, can you make lying down more comfortable if you are getting pain?
Yes, the towel.
Yeah.
So Alex actually mentioned the small towel. One of the first exercises, this may be useful for Alexis, is when we're doing that first core engagement exercise in the back in shape. For many people, I forget if Alex actually did this in the past or not, but using a smaller towel. So not a full rolled up towel the size of a foam roller, but a small, maybe a tea towel, a hand towel, or the hand towel that one might have in the bathroom that's maybe only that big, rolled up. Something like this will be a little bit too small, but you'll get the thickness here. But something just like that sort of thickness, maybe a touch thicker than that, just to support this a little bit more rather than get the decompression stretch. It just supports the structure a little bit better, and that has helped a number of people in the phase 1 and the phase 2 of the back in shape as well. So it's worth bearing that in mind as well.
Okay. Alice Pesco also says, totally agree with what you are saying about the GP and physios who diagnose you with sciatica. Really feel like they should image more rather than assume all back pain have the same pathology. Yes.
The thing is, back pain affects someone so much, and getting a scan done tomorrow and then being able to tell that patient definitively this is the deal, rather than faffing around, for 6 weeks and causing someone to essentially have to have extra time off work, the mental consequences, the physical consequences, the disruption consequences for their employer as well. All those sorts of things can make life so much more difficult than if we just got the imaging done on day one. You could say, well, it's expensive. Well, the imaging's already been bought. The MRI machine has already been bought. And I know for a fact because when I was doing training on X-ray taking, this is quite some years ago, one of the ladies that actually built would go and install MRI machines, etc. That was her business, and was in that, was saying that during the 2000s they had literally cloakrooms where there were MRI machines or expensive bits of kit that just were not being used. They were being used as a janitor's closet at the time, and that was her from someone who was actually fitting them and installing them and being paid to put them into these hospitals in certain cases, or rather check that they were compliant with the radiation regulations, that they were just not there, not being used. So the wait times are not really excusable, and it can really mentally help someone just say, look, this is exactly what's going on in your spine. You can see it, I can see it. It doesn't necessarily change that you still need to do your rehab, but people aren't stupid. They can understand these things. That's why we do these live streams, to help you guys understand. And once you can understand something, you can deal with it an awful lot better.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the unknown that just wears you down.
The unknown, it could be anything. It could be all sorts of horrible things that we don't want to discuss. But once you can see it, you can say, it's not as bad as we thought. It's giving you a lot of pain, but it's there.
Yeah. And
we need to do something. And saying it's normal age-related wear and tear or normal age stuff is just a whole nother barrel of, bag of worms, or whatever the phrase is.
Okay, Joe has said here, is clicking in the back or sacrum when lying down a bad sign that there is instability in the spine?
Not necessarily. If we're lying on our back and forcing to click ourselves by twisting and contorting our body, then I definitely would not be doing that. That's not wise. The reason for that is we normally, as an individual, you will manipulate or pop the same segments over and over again. And in reality, you probably need to pop the ones that aren't popping, but you need to be able to get in there with an applicator to actually get those to release off. But the reason that they're building up in terms of tension is because you're using your body inappropriately on a daily basis. Those joints aren't functioning properly. You're getting build-up of, it's generally nitrogen gas inside those joints. That's going to affect the fluid on fluid contact points. It affects the functioning. You get that feeling like, I just want to get it to click. And that builds up because we are not using our body on a correct way on a daily basis. And if you do, and you try and avoid that need to do that, start to get some support in your spine, start to do exercises like the towel, etc., you're going to start to find that you don't need to do that as often. But I would generally try and avoid it. And it's not a problem when it does pop or release. That's not an issue.
Okay, Ollie asked, is it good to do the exercises like the dead bugs with the towel? And Alex commented on that, and he said, agree. The small towel really helps with exercises like the dead bugs and hamstrings. If you're doing them on your back, it is massively helpful.
Yes. So the both of those. I mean, Alex has answered it.
Yeah,
I touched on that very briefly, but yeah, Ollie, using the towel down there is going to be helpful when you're a beginner. I'd say after you've been doing them for a little while, we need to start to transition off. We can't always have the stabilizers on, but it's okay to start off with the stabilizers on when we're learning to ride. So, use a towel. It stabilizes you a little bit, helps you, makes it a bit easier. But we do need to transition off there, and sometimes that requires a little bit of a brave approach, because a lot of people have been through the run of the mill. They've been feeling almost there, and then they've relapsed again, and just having a little bit of support that it's okay.
Okay, I think that's everything. Just a couple of comments. Cheryl said, yes, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. Sally did comment, say, yes, awesome. It is sensitive to touch the tissues.
Yeah. So that sensitivity is inappropriate. That part of the issue is inappropriate.
Yes, and Alex said, just one last comment, yes, sciatica is a symptom rather than a diagnosis for the GPs and physios. Yep. And I think that is everything for today.
Awesome. Well, just one last plug, only because it's going to run out and we don't want anyone to miss out. We do have that competition running for the inversion table, which will run out at the end of this week. So we're going to be announcing the winner on Friday's live stream. So if you want to enter, super easy. Instructions will be, there's a link to be that under here. We got the comment in there as well. On Facebook.
I've put the link in, yes, awesome. in the comments.
So you have a look at that, and good luck to everyone that enters. In other news, we've got the flexibility protocol, which will be coming out at the end of this month. So really, really exciting. That'll hopefully help you guys have something to add in the phase 3 point. Quite a lot of detail there. So hopefully you guys are going to have something to look forward to. Well, you will have something to look forward to towards the end of this month. So that's going to be awesome.
It's all going on.
It's all going on. Lots of stuff happening behind the scenes. So hopefully you guys find these live streams helpful and all the other content that we do. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for the questions, and have a great afternoon. We will see you tomorrow with another live stream. Thanks so much for joining us on today's video. Hopefully you found it packed full of useful information. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune in to some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live, so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.